Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results. Hi, I'm Perry Holly, a Maxwell Leadership Facilitator and Coach.
And I'm Chris Cody, Executive Vice President with Maxwell Leadership. Welcome, and thank you for joining. As we get started today, I want to encourage you to visit maxwellleadership.com/podcast. There you can find out more about the 5 levels of leadership, which is really the basis of everything that we do in the corporate training, consulting, coaching side of our business, and is what this podcast was really formed off of, the methodology that John created so many years ago. And so if you're interested in learning more about that model, how it can help your team, I want to encourage you to go there, fill out a form, and or if you have a question for us or a comment, we would love to hear from you. Well, today's topic,
It's not a topic, it's an event.
Yeah, I'm going to stop real quick. The first thing I want to do is just say thank you.
Yes.
Man, you for helping drive 200, our production team with Jake and them, and getting us to 200. This topic is real. The topic today is podcast number 200.
200.
And then we're going to talk about 5 lessons that we learned. And so I love what you did right there. I just set up the stage of saying, hey, this is about the 5 levels of leadership, and you got 5 lessons.
I love that.
I'm proud of you. It took you 200 episodes to do this, but I'm proud of you for doing this.
Got 5 in there again.
Yeah.
I knew you would appreciate
Yes.
that and appreciate your partnership in this. It's been, like you said, we started and thought after we covered the first 5 levels. That was podcast number 6. What are we going to do now? And we've just had the most fun. It's been a great learning experience, and we have learned a ton. I thought that's where I would go today was some lessons that we've learned in doing the podcast that I think apply to every leader.
They do, yeah. And so let me back you up and tell you how this started. And it is Perry. You were coaching me at the time.
That's right.
You were part of our team, but I also asked you to coach me and spend some time working through some things from a leadership standpoint. And so I was starting this podcast, and I wanted it to be based on the 5 levels of leadership, and I wanted to talk about the competencies that came along with it. And one of the things I did was I recorded, the first episode, and I did it by myself, which was horrendous. Let me just start by saying
horrendous.
It was monotone. It was boring. I think our producer at the time probably fell asleep, and that's why it ran, to 42 minutes instead of now we keep it on 20. But I sent it to you, and I said, hey, as a coach of mine, I want to send this. I just want some feedback. And I loved his feedback because he said, you want some help? We can do it together. And I was like, well, I don't know how to take that feedback, right? Like, was it that bad? And I know that we joke about it to this day. And
all I said, were you reading that? You said, could you tell?
Yeah.
I said, yeah, a little. But
yeah.
So I have an idea.
It was great. Yeah. And so out of that, it started our relationship of doing this podcast together and the lessons that we've learned, starting with that one, which is going to lead us to the very first lesson.
So lesson 1 is that we work well together. And while it's true that we are friends and we genuinely like each other, there's a much deeper lesson that I think all leaders really need to acknowledge. And that is that, like, when you showed me episode 1 and you asked for that feedback, you accepted that feedback and then invited me to join you in the studio. I gave you a couple samples about how I envisioned it, but you immediately welcome that, in that how we work well together, I think, as leaders, working with our teams, is that I actually found that to be quite unusual. You were the head executive doing a very creative thing on your own, but you asked for feedback. That was huge. I had not seen a lot of that. And 2, you received the feedback, and you weren't. We joke about it now, but you weren't knocked back by it at all. You said, "Oh, yeah, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Can you help?" Yeah. You tried.
You want to do it?
I drug you back in, but no, you didn't go throw out your hands. You said, "How can we add value? How can we make it better?" And that we looked at our individual roles and responsibilities, and who's going to writing and creating and then executing and delivering it. I asked you. I remember asking him on the. I did 2, wrote 2. We went to the studio. We did the 2, and you said, "Man, this is what we need. This is great." I said, "You want to write the next 2?" And you said, "No, I don't write. No." You said, "You're the creative." But I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" You said, "I react against stuff that's created." And I had never thought about that. That roles and responsibilities was really a magic sauce. Was I need somebody to help make it better, but I like creating it. And so we just started that partnership. And I thought, everywhere else I've been, I felt like I was knocking somebody out of the way that, "Oh, you wanna write, I wanna write." We're competing.
Yeah.
You and I never competed on this. We found our roles, and we worked well together. I think a lot of leadership truth can come out of that
Yeah.
with how you work with your team.
Yeah, I think when you talk about that lesson that we've learned to work well together, I think too many leaders at times when you come up with an idea or you start something, like you want it to be just your baby, and you don't want to bring in other pieces
Mhm.
that have what we call kind of our unique intelligence of what we bring to the team, and it's okay to do that. Like,
Right.
be open to doing that, and I'm grateful that, we were able to have that conversation and you were able to do that, because we wouldn't be at episode number 200. Because what Perry was just talking about is one of the things that we understand about leading people is really understanding how you're wired. And so for me, one of the assessments that we use is the right path
Right.
assessment, the 4 and 6. And what I think is so powerful about that assessment is really the sub factors that go into the results of that. And so I know that there's DISC and Myers-Briggs, and I just feel like this takes it to a deeper level. And when it gets to down to one of the areas for me and how I'm wired, I'm very concrete, right? And you are not as concrete, a little
Mhm.
more abstract, and you
Mhm.
create.
Right.
And I can react. And one of the examples we use about the difference between people on your team that are concrete versus abstract is that if you were to take a thin piece of metal and you had several pieces of paper and you're like, "Hey, I need you to create something out of that to hold these pieces of paper together." Well, I'd probably just sit there for 4 hours looking at the piece of metal and the paper and go, I got nothing. Perry would come along with his creative mindset and a little more abstract than me, and he'd create the paperclip. And then I'd go, "Oh man, that's great. But you know what this make this even better is now let me put the slits in the
Yeah, the ridges on
in
there.
the
Yeah,
ridges in the
yeah,
paper
yeah.
cut to hold it." And so we just create and think differently. And leaders need to be okay with having
Yeah.
people around you, even when it's your idea and it's something that you want to do, to be able to best use not only your skill set, but best use the skill set, because you love to write. You do it. You
Mhm.
have a routine. You write every single day,
Yep.
and you're extremely creative. And so I absolutely love that, and it's worked well together because I don't like to write. Matter of fact, yeah, I'm not even going to go there. So I don't write. So just make sure that as you go through this too, we're also very clear
Yeah.
and working well together on what our roles are
Mhm.
and how we come up with these podcasts. So I love that lesson. I think
Yeah.
it's very
Well,
very
lesson
applicable.
2 is that was interesting also. Lesson 2 is that leadership is a journey that never ends.
Yeah.
And I laughed when I was just brainstorming on what have we learned about this that applies to every leader is that our original plan, as I mentioned earlier, was we were gonna be just about the 5 levels of leadership. And I thought, "Okay, we did the intro, and then there's 5 levels. What do we do for episode 7?" And, well, we started expounding on level 1 and 2. Then we branched into 360 leader and how we talked about influence, but influence is 360 degrees. How do you lead up? How do you lead
Hmm.
down? How do you lead across? And then we started all of a sudden, we just all the lessons as we began to get deeper and deeper into our own leadership journeys, we really learned that the 5 levels is a great framework, but off of that, we can launch 200 podcasts
Yeah.
about other topics that are affecting not only you and me, but every leader that we interface with.
Yeah. And I love this lesson about leadership is growth, that never ends. It's one of our uh, enterprise values. It's so important to us. And I think as leaders, we need to remember that. Here's the words that I put to that lesson is that without movement, there is no movement. Meaning we just committed to being the 5 levels. And then, as you mentioned, with the intro, the first one, the intro, and then the 5, we were guaranteed 6. We didn't know where 7 was coming, but we just kept going,
Yeah.
and we kept movement. And since we had that movement, other things happened. And too many times, I know I struggled with this from a paralysis standpoint, where you think you got to have it all mapped out and it's got to be perfect. And I just want to encourage you that as you begin to grow, understand there's going to be a cycle, a success cycle that we've talked about previously, and you just got to create some movement. The other thing too is I think anytime as leaders, if we're going to get into the lane of something being successful, then we got to be open to growing and having growth happen inside us so that you can
Mhm.
leverage your best asset, which is you.
Yeah.
By the way, leaders, you are your best asset. And so be open to that growing part of anything that you start.
Hey, podcast listeners, how would you like to be equipped with the tools to continue your personal growth and refine your strengths and weaknesses, all while being surrounded by other growth-minded leaders like yourself? You may have heard of our International Maxwell Conference, or IMC. It's our biannual event in which Maxwell Leadership Certified team members come from all around the world to grow and learn together. IMC this August is the first time we're opening the event to the public by kicking the event off with our first ever Personal Growth Day. This is a 1.5-day event on August 29th through 30th in Orlando, Florida, and it's designed to dig deeper into who you are and how you tick so that you can become the best version of yourself. If you are unable to attend Personal Growth Day in person, we also offer virtual access to the event. If you'd like to participate in a one-of-a-kind experience and stand shoulder to shoulder with growing leaders who will sharpen your skills and equip you to create powerful, positive impact in your life, go to maxwellleadership.com/personal growth day to learn more or get your ticket. We'll see you there.
Lesson 3, I called it change, challenge, and continuous improvement are a part of everything worthy and good. We started in a professional studio. I remember we would drive, I don't know how many miles we would drive to our professional studio with our professional sound engineer. We had professional headsets and professional microphones. We had professional stools. We stood up and looked at each other the whole time. We confronted 2020 and the COVID situation, which threw us a curve, but we didn't miss an episode.
Nope.
We were able to flex with that. We used Zoom, we've used Teams, we've used other platforms to record. We've used WebEx. We've tried audio and video. Now we're on YouTube. Who knew that these two ugly guys would be on YouTube?
That's right.
And so change forced us by conditions. Some were chosen, some were not.
That's right.
To improve. And the only thing that was constant really was that from one week to the next, we were going to do this. But I just think for most leaders, I think the lesson there really is about you've got to be prepared to change and to flex and to have a plan B. Be ready to go because it's never going to be a straight shot.
Yeah. There's always an answer. There's always a solution, right? As leaders. And I think that sometimes, especially when you're doing something that you're passionate about, maybe you started, maybe it's your baby, you get frustrated and then you just kind of throw your hands up. But there are always things that are going to change. If you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance a whole lot less. And so how you react to that and how you solve those problems is going to be extremely critical to the success or the significant impact. We're over, 3 million downloads. And so we're talking about 200 episodes, but the amount of people, you and I, that is, for us, that's significant. Like, we love the fact that it's not a number thing. It's the fact that, man, over 300 downloads, meaning that hopefully there's pieces in here that somebody has taken and become a better leader, because everybody deserves to be led well. And so all of that has happened with us having to pivot, which is a overused word these days, and change. The other thing that I'll say there is that also as leaders, when you are evaluating something that's your baby and you're getting it started or things that you're doing, man, do not hesitate to force a change or let people come in and speak into a change that needs to happen, to where you are proactive and looking for ways to improve things so that you're always growing, always learning.
Yeah. I love that. And then lesson 4, I was thinking that, the interesting that the John Maxwell thought leadership is our platform. It's our where we start with everything. But we customize it to speak to specific audiences. And I thought that John's books and teachings have really inspired everything we do, inspired us as leaders ourselves. But it was up to us. I think it's up to leaders to apply. And I think John would agree with that you have a concepts and he's very creative in how he presents the concept, but we must as leaders then figure out how do we apply that to others. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah. I think so many of us read a book and we go, oh man, that's a good idea. And then we kind of gloss over what we learned. Maybe it's theory based, maybe even some of it was practical, but we don't ever apply it. And that's really kind of what we were going after here, is to keep it short, keep it under 20 minutes and say, man, this is what's happening in the field. This is how you should apply it. These are things that you need to be paying attention to. And then also to communicate the message that leadership is influence. You don't have to have a title in order to have influence over a group of people, a team, voluntary, family, whatever it might be. And then finally, what this lesson here, one of the things I was thinking about was, um, is we talk about the fact that as leaders, you may not have anybody via title that's following you, as I use that in air quotes, but it's so important to be listening and applying principles before the moment so that you're ready in the moment when those opportunities show up. As the great coach John Wooden said, when opportunity arises, it's too late to prepare.
Yeah.
And so how do we begin applying what, we've learned as leaders in our lives? And then hopefully you've been able to apply that in your life, no matter what your title is, no matter whether you have direct reports or you don't, because leadership is influence.
Right. Good. And then number 5, I just thought, while it looks like the Chris and Perry show, we don't do this alone. It takes a team to
Yeah.
do this, and a team is everything. If you're going to be, John says, one is too small a number to do anything significant,
Yes, right.
and we would not be anywhere without our team. And I remember we started off with Jean-Luc in the professional studio, and now we're here in our own studio with our own professional producers and Jake and Javon, and that we don't have a lot to say with the final. We started off, but
That's right.
it takes a life of its own once it leaves these microphones.
Yeah, that's right. I 100% agree with that. And I think anything that we do in life, in leadership, I think when you have a team of people, makes it so much more rewarding to take that journey together. One of my favorite images of leadership is the football huddle. And why that's so powerful for me, and one of my favorites, is that everybody in there, all 11 individuals in a American football team, is that each one of them has a very distinct role. And if each one is not executing in their skill set, then the team is not successful. And that's what I think about when I think about the fact that we have a team around us, both on this podcast, on the other podcasts that we have, Maxwell Leadership Podcast, even on Don Yeager's Corporate Competitor Podcast, as we're helping with that. There are a team of people that are in that huddle that are making decisions and executing in a way that allows us to impact and reach people that will have a significant impact on their leadership journey. Back to the statement that I said a minute ago, because we want to create powerful, positive change because everybody deserves to be led well.
Well, it's been a blast. I just can't even believe it's 200.
Unbelievable.
It went fast, and I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to the next one. If you could all write in with a suggested topic, because after 200, I have no idea.
Yeah,
what's next.
you're done.
No,
Yeah, he's
no.
retiring.
No,
This is his sign off.
there's a ton of content. Yeah, that's all. For
Yeah,
me.
that's it. Perry's out.
Perry out.
And so is Chris, by the way, just how we started this podcast.
Yeah. So anyway, if you'd like to know more about our offerings or leave a comment or a question, you can do that at maxwellleadership.com/podcast. We're always so grateful to hear from you, and we're grateful that you would spend this time with us for this episode and all of them. That's all today from the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast.